welcome in everybody to podcast episode 2. Tonight's episode is all about the in-depth of Final Fantasy VII Remake, and what we are going to start with is introducing everybody that's on tonight's episode. So first we've got Jay.
Hello.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, okay. My name is Jay. I also I wasn't prepared for this. I stream on Twitch as well. I play video games. I love Final Fantasy VII. I started playing like as a little kid in Japanese version actually, and I played it again when I came to America in an English version. I loved it, and then I've been playing ever since.
It's a very cute story. Kain, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello. I also stream on Twitch and YouTube. Basically played through all the Final Fantasies besides 11. And I actually just got platinum on this game a couple days ago.
Yeah, that's some hardcore gameplay that Kain's been up to. And Tomato is a bit of a regular these days, but you can still introduce yourself, Tomato.
Hi, I'm Tomato. Big Final Fantasy fan. Most of you know me. Hello.
Well, I mean, the way that I would introduce Tomato is that he will talk for hours about anything Final Fantasy related, as will Jay and Kain, which is exactly why I've got them in for. Yeah, that's exactly why you guys are here. You're great for it. So let's get straight into it. And the first question is actually aimed at Jay. What were the significant story differences that stood out to you between this and the original?
So, wait, by the way, is this spoiler free or is this okay?
No, you can. It's okay. It's okay. We're going with the assumption that people have played and seen the game.
I was gonna say there's probably full spoilers at this point.
Yeah.
Okay. So, the biggest surprise for me was the whispers, and the fact that the ending, or towards the end, the fact that Zack is alive. Maybe. So those of you who don't know, the whisper is apparently they're the deciding factor who decides, or rather they're the arbiter of fate who tells you the stories should be the way they are, like just in the FF7. I thought that was super meta, but
a little bit, yeah.
Like when for example, when Sephiroth tried to kill Barrett, but the whisper stopped them from Barrett dying, and that I think was the biggest change of the story, and that wasn't apparent in the original FF7. But does anyone have input on the whispers?
Well, yeah, they very much, I think, represented. Like, there was a very big meta section of the fandom who reacted to it, saying that's all of the people who said, "I hope they don't change the game."
Right.
And it was a bit of some people took it very personally, that you have to overcome that at the end of the game, as a way of telling some of the more extreme fans to like, you actually physically beat them down before moving on with the game, kind of thing.
Yeah, like a in-game way to tell them just get over it. It's a new story now.
Yeah, and then when they beat Whispers, and that kind of ties in with the Zack, the scene of Zack being alive, and in the sequel, you can maybe kind of think that maybe Zack will be alive, and then something related with Cloud changing the timeline, because now that Whisper is beaten, that it doesn't have to follow the traditional old FF7 story.
And that's when a lot of like confusion and also possible anger could come in, because a lot of people are saying, where can it go from there if they're doing such a mix-up?
Right. They can go anywhere now with it.
Yeah.
It's very much that it's so up in the air at the moment. Everyone's sort of waiting for any kind of news on part 2, where it could just be an excuse to give Zack, okay, he does have a bit more backstory now, but he's still going to get
Zack into
the
timeline.
chop at some point, and lead to the kind of setup of 7 as we kind of know it. There's no reason they couldn't sort of stick to the original but expand upon it. No one really knows what we're going to get on part 2.
But do you guys really what's your opinion on maybe them changing this part of the storyline? Would you guys be mad about that or be okay? Personally, I feel like it's gonna be interesting and I welcome that. But I don't know about you guys.
I mean, as long as they do it well, I'd be okay with it.
Yeah, it's about whether implementation is really well done. I won't lie, I didn't think the whispers were like the best way to do that, but obviously, like, I'm more than happy to see what they do with part 2, and you know, if it's good, it's good. It doesn't really matter if it's exactly the same as the original necessarily.
Exactly.
Cool. So on to the next question for Tomato. Could you actually talk us through the character's history between Cloud and Zack? Because some people in chat might not know the whole backstory of them and why he was even shown in this game.
So I mean, it was a bit. I did hear of a lot of people who've not played originals feeling like they had no idea what it was, why he was there. It was very much included for fans of the original, the Zack part. Originally, I think someone might be able to say better for Crisis Core, but from my vague memories, that expands upon Cloud and Zack's first meeting, where they basically Cloud sort of looks up to Zack because he's just this lowly peon foot soldier at Shinra, and yeah, Zack kind of gives him good advice and all of that sort of stuff. And then that leads to the sort of events of the flashback in 7, where you see Cloud obviously hides his face when he returns to Nibelheim to protect his pride for something like that, you know, because he told Tifa he was going to join Soldier and all of this. And then they end up going through the entire Nibelheim incident together, which is basically like a huge shared trauma of having people you know killed in front of you, betrayals from people you looked up to, and the company you work for completely kind of stabbing you in the back, then experimenting on them, and then they work together to escape in some way, if I recall. And Cloud's very, very messed up at this point, and it's all on Zack. Zack does everything in his power to get them back to Midgar safe, and he eventually sacrifices himself in the original game to that end. But between all this experimentation, this does obviously lead to a bit of an identity crisis for Cloud, where through either the experiments or the trauma, he starts jumbling elements of his life up with Zack, and basically leads to his version of the Nibelheim flashback that we first see in Calm. And I could probably go into more detail, I guess.
We'll leave it there for now. Kain, we've seen scenes of Cloud and Zack backstory at the end of the game. Do you think that that's going to become a larger part of future episodes? I mean, we've just touched on that a little bit, but do you think they will change the original backstory? Like maybe do the time changes that we've seen some Final Fantasy games do, where they flip time?
Right. Yeah, I don't think they'll change anything. They'll probably expand it and add a lot of the Crisis Core backstory that we didn't get in the original 7. But yeah, I think we'll definitely see a lot more Zack since they have that whole alternate timeline now with him alive. So it'll be real weird they just kind of dropped it in future parts.
Yeah. So moving on from the Cloud and Zack part, Jay, in this game, Wutai has been quite regularly mentioned compared to the original game. Like it's really become a bigger sort of political statement in a lot of the cutscenes that we saw. Do you think that means that it's going to become more of a playable area in the future parts when it gets to Wutai, as in it will become an island filled with other cities and towns compared to the original?
Yeah, I think they did a really interesting take on Wutai. Like I personally haven't played FF7 Crisis Core, but I know in like Kain and Tomato can talk more about this, but like they focus more like the history of Wutai and how Avalanche was formed there and how Sephiroth became a war hero. They go much more in depth there. And like FF7 this remake tries to get all the history together and to focus more on the history of that. And they also changed they also made the Avalanche like a central plot point too. So with that being said, I think on the sequel, we could probably expect Wutai would be not only it's a required place instead of being an optional place. I would expect Wutai to be probably have a much more of a bigger area playability. Like what's that place? Marketplace was way, in my opinion, was way more bigger and more in depth than the original. So something probably like the Marketplace, but a little bit bigger is in my opinion. So I'm very excited to see where this will unfold.
It's interesting because I couldn't remember the fact you mentioned Avalanche in regards to Wutai. I actually honestly cannot remember. I've only played Crisis Core once, but
I think that was more in before Crisis. They talk about that in Crisis
it?
Core.
Oh, right. Because I was going to say my
remember
memory
mentioning
is
it much
from
either.
original 7. I think isn't there the bit where Barrett mentions Avalanche was like the original Avalanche was formed in Cosmo Canyon, or like they were inspired by Cosmo Canyon or something like that.
Right, it was something like that.
Yeah.
So that's just what set me off. I thought, oh, is that a detail they've genuinely changed, or over the time with Crisis Core, or before Crisis?
I don't know where, like, it's my all Final Fantasy blending up the history, but I remember Barrett mentioning something about Wutai, but from my understanding, Wutai was, I don't know where I got this information, but Wutai was formed in, sorry, Avalanche was formed in Wutai, and then, again, Kain might understand it better, but I believe, like, Shinra wanted to form or form like their headquarters in the Wutai, but Wutai said no, and then they started having a fight against another, and then I think Shinra kind of sent like a militia towards them, and then Sephiroth was part of the war hero that fought against Wutai. Is this correct?
Yeah. This is as much as I remember. Yeah. The interesting thing was the war hero thing. I've never actually thought of this before because it only came up when I actually looked at the questions for this podcast. I never actually thought about how close in proximity Nibelheim is to Wutai on the world map. And it's not really gone into in game, but I wonder if they touch upon the idea that part of why Cloud idealizes Sephiroth when he's a young boy being a war hero, it's going to be like that town's maybe closer to the frontier, and they get they see
right, got
like
more exposure to it.
Yeah. I'm curious whether they end up going down that route as well with the Nibelheim memories kind of thing, and obviously focusing on that war, and what inspires Cloud to even leave Nibelheim in the first place.
Interesting. On the topic of Avalanche being bigger in this game than, well, in my eyes, bigger in this game than in the original, because in this game they've got an entire organization and squad teams.
Right, it's a whole centralized organization in this one.
Yeah, Kain, do you think that that's going to become a bigger thing as we travel across the world map? Is it going to become more integrated into the game somehow?
I don't think that much, because Barrett, or I forgot who exactly mentioned it in the game, they said like they had a falling out with the rest of Avalanche because they thought it was too extreme, so they probably wouldn't come to help anybody out. But something they could do, because there was the rumors that there was a branch helping out Wutai. So if you go to Wutai, we actually get to see that play out at some point.
That's a very good point. And I know I've mentioned this with Tomato in the previous episode, but Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge potentially still being alive in contradiction to the original. What storylines do you think they could take part in? I guess new ones, or can you see them integrate into original? Tomato?
Oh, is that for me? Sorry. They could really go any way with it. If they really wanted to, they could probably. I think they'll stick them to being side characters, not necessarily playable, but they could integrate them a hell of a lot more into the rest of the game. I think was it you who mentioned like Wedge or someone could appear on the Highwind later on in the game as a quest provider or something like that. They could easily do that.
Biggs there.
But a part of me also thinks like if it isn't some kind of alternate timeline shenanigans or dimensions or whatever it is we're seeing, they could easily, like I mentioned with Zach, it's just an excuse to give them more story time, and eventually they are going to kick the bucket in the sequel. But that might feel like flip-flopping because they've already died, not, like they can't do that too much because it's a bit hammy. No one likes it too much when it happens.
It won't stop caring eventually.
Yeah. It loses the impact of a death if it's instantly undone, usually.
Yeah, that's true. Moving on to battle tactics and things like that. We know that Kain has completed this game and platinum, so he's clearly gotten through a few versions. Jay and Tomato, which battle mode did you choose to play with? Classic, easy, or normal, and why? Jay?
So I started with normal, and from what I understand, the difference between classic and normal. Classic is more it just plays it by itself, and you can control anytime you want, but automatically the characters block, move, and attack for you. But the AI doesn't do a great job attacking. It mostly blocks, and it's not the best way. But the players can focus more heavily on ATB gauge, and whenever that fills up, you can press X and do your movement sets. Versus in normal, I believe you have to control everything, so you have to do a lot more thinking, and there's more strategy behind. So players who might not be well equipped with multiple multiple thinking and they're not used to ATB gauge, they might consider it classic. But hey man, normal is actually pretty hard. It's not just original FF7. It's pretty damn hard to do well. I guess you can button mash still, but still it gets kind of hard.
Yeah, there's a good bit of thinking that goes into it compared to any previous games, Final Fantasy games. Tomato, I think you were a normal as well, were you not?
Yeah. Of course, I did have a look at Classic when I think it was on the demo, and I realised kind of, okay, it might be for some people, but it felt like it wasn't for me. I'll happily play and try and do all of the thinking and different strategies they potentially want you to do.
I thought you were say more.
No.
Okay, and Kain, you have played it on normal and hard. What were the main differences between those two?
The main difference in hard mode is MP, because what they do in hard mode, they prevent you from using items at all the entire game.
Oh, wow.
And benches will only heal HP, so your MP only comes back from the little Shinra boxes, and from like passive regen in battle. So you have to be really conservative with your MP in that mode.
Wow, okay.
That's easily the biggest difference.
Yeah. That must have been quite a different play style for you then, to go from normal to hard.
I usually don't use that much magic to begin with, so it wasn't a huge deal for me. But for like characters that love for players that love using magic, it's going to be a big difference for them.
Okay. Tomato, now we've got a question that's a bit spread across the whole gaming world. Do you think that the battle and difficulty modes compare to other games? And if so, which ones?
I don't know about comparing the difficulty. I honestly found, I don't know whether I just kind of lucked out and found a particular strategy that worked for me throughout, but I didn't have too many wipes on 7 Remake, in all honesty. There were definitely several fights where it just like caused me a big hiccup. But like for the final boss, I just did it first time, for example.
Right.
But there's a lot of modern games that I'd say are like that. The biggest comparison I thought to make between other battle systems is actually to something like Secret of Mana, which has been like a pretty standard action RPG going around, and it's actually 7 Remake release coincided nicely with Trials of Mana Remake being released, and even though they're very, very different, they're incredibly different. If you play both of them, you wouldn't necessarily think to compare them, but if you actually look at it, they've got real-time inputs for attacking. They've both got a kind of in-game pause where you select your items or your spells, and shortcuts to said special moves and things. The weapons are upgradable. All your characters have stats, then level and they grow. They're actually like surprisingly similar, but I think actually 7 Remake did it with a lot. It did it a lot better than Trials of Mana, personally.
What year did Trials of Mana come out?
Well, the very, very original Trials of Mana was on the SNES back in like the early 90s or the mid 90s.
Yeah, definitely 90s, yeah.
But this remake is obviously literally, like I say, it came out, I think, maybe 1 or 2 months after 7 Remake.
All right.
But yeah, it feels very different, and it feels odd to compare them, because it's not that I didn't enjoy the Trials of Mana battle system, but I'd say to that end, 7 Remake like kind of blew it out the water personally.
Oh, well, that's nice. That's good to know.
Good.
Jay, do you think that the improved battle mechanics compared to any previous Final Fantasy games, or do you think it added too many elements? Because in this one, we've got the weapon upgrades, the abilities to learn, as well as the Punisher and Operator mode, which were actually pretty badass, but...
Sure. Well, just to go off of the Secret of Mana, I think you can't... Like this remake, in my opinion, was one of the best battle mechanic system I've ever seen. They made it like the ATB. I don't think any FF Final Fantasy series can top this battle mechanic off. And even comparing with the other like a ATB kind of system, you have to think constantly. Like you can make it as simple as you can and as complicated as you want it. Like you can spend a normal boss fight, let's say, and spend hours and hours trying to perfect that. And you can, I've seen a player who, when you go to other, let's say you go to Barret, you switch your characters to Barret, the enemy focuses on the main character, so they'll come after you. So I've seen other player like do this complicated mechanic where you constantly switch off nonstop just as an enemy is about to focus you so that you never get hit. It's very, very, like, you can make it as complicated as you want, but like that's not the point of this battle mechanic. They made it extremely fluid. They made the whole, it's like they combined Kingdom Hearts series and Final Fantasy 15 plus the other Final Fantasy series like FF13 series where you have stagger mechanism. So you don't just button mash all the way, but you have to think about like how much should I ATB gauge, should I save to do most damage when it's staggered, and what should I do to stagger it faster. You can even increase the percentage. You can even do like special mechanics, like you can put the materia stop on the enemy, and it'll stop the stagger gauge. Even smallest thing, you can make it super complicated and have the best battle system. You can even do time dodges like Dark Souls, even though it's not as emphasized of the time dodges, but you can. Other smallest thing like pressure, you can pressure an enemy and knock off balance to increase the stagger gauge quicker.
I was just bringing up a post someone made on, I think it was the QHIM forums, about why they loved the original 7, and I agree that it's part of why 7's battle system aged really well is that it gave you a lot of freedom to either perfectly do it, you can be amazing at it, or do everything like without too much trouble if you know what you're doing, or you can equip only fire materia on every character and probably get through the game pretty much happily along. Like, you had the complete freedom to be really flexible and get as into the battle system as you wanted, and I think part of that's still, present. I mean, there's more to do in the new one, but you have the freedom there to focus on staggering, or focus on my materia elemental weaknesses, or I'm just going to hack and slash and try and dodge perfectly.
Jay, yes, your button shortcuts, please go on.
Yes, so I was mentioning, like, early in the game, I realized that I thought that was really cool, but then as the game got more intense, I started not using it as much. But as I mentioned before, like, you can go on and on for just like a simple boss fight and make the best boss fight and barely get hit. But for the sake of this, the sake of time, you can just use a shortcut, which I need to use that more better. And you can maximize it by changing what each trigger does. It's for a simplicity's sake, for people who are so tired of having to press X every time and having to go through like, oh, I gotta press X, move right, and then trigger the air special attack and blah blah blah, which you can be doing quickly by L1 and then clicking whatever, and that saves a lot of time, to be honest.
I love that feature that they added. That
Can I ask, did anyone play it more as an action game using those button shortcuts then? Because I really appreciated the kind of time slowdown when you pressed X. I appreciate some people will, like, obviously would prefer not to, but that always allowed me, like, the freedom to go, right, now what am I doing? I can move the camera, what's going on in the battlefield. That was my moment to, like, strategize for me. So I'm just curious, like, did anyone try? I
was kind of like half and half with it.
Yeah,
I would definitely use it a lot for healing, but for regular abilities, I tried doing the shortcuts more.
I think that's that tactical mode, that I happen to use that so much to a point where it wasn't enjoyable for people watching, because I was strategized forever. I gotta move right, blah blah blah. So and then I took way too much time on these simple fights to do really perfectly. So I found myself spending too much time on tactical time. So I gotta use more shortcut, I realized.
See, I liked it as I didn't use it because I completely forgot it immediately. But in knowing that it exists, I kind of like that it's there, because I feel that it's once again, it's the Final Fantasy franchise trying to spread out to as many people as possible. So it's bringing in more. I feel anyway that it's bringing in more chance of a younger audience, as well as the old school original audience, because a lot of people these days wouldn't be used to that style of battle tactic where you have to go into a menu screen and click all of these things in order to do that. Lots of people want instant stuff these days. So yeah, I feel like they might have added it for that reason.
Yeah, it gives you the chance to do it either way.
Yeah.
Right, as we were saying, it gives you the freedom to play the game how you would play it.
How you wanted to, yeah.
Yeah. And back onto the whole materia conversation that we were having before, with Chadley giving you some random materials. Tomato, which do you think was your most used materia and why?
Well, the two I was going to say, because I think I mentioned in the last podcast that I basically assessed everything as a point of order the second I got into combat, because it would go then, I use this to stagger it. Done. The other thing I'd say was basically Cure, and I think it's called Amplify, because it acted Magnify. It acted as this game's only all. As we mentioned earlier, it didn't rebought, like, you didn't get new materia when you mastered it, and I kind of see why, because if they had allowed that, I would have been able to add multiple magnifies with Cure all on everyone and every element on it. I think that would have been a bit like balance issues there.
I agree. To be honest, that was like that was like the original FF7's biggest problem. Like I would use all the time, and it would be so unbalanced. It would just make the whole game so easier, you know.
Yeah.
But so
Yeah, that
those
definitely
two.
helped.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. Jay, were there any materials that you missed that were in the original version and not in this one?
What do you mean by like missed, like that I really wanted back in the remake series?
Yeah.
I so far, like, I mean, I would have to say maybe like all materia. That was my favorite, and now they kind of reduced to like magnify, which I think maximum is like 25% less damage, right?
And you only get
In the
one.
original. Yeah, you only get one in the whole game.
Yeah.
Is it one or two? But one. And in the originals, you get like, I don't know, tons, like crazy tons.
Everything.
But I can't really think of any materia that I specifically miss so much. I don't know about you guys.
I don't know if a lot of them I don't think would translate. Though it'd be quite funny just to try and see someone incorporate long reach as a materia, But the one that I thought would be obvious would be what is it? Either there's added cut and steel as well.
Yep.
Though stealing really wasn't a big proponent in the remake. There's literally one significant steal, I think.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I'm surprised that they didn't do something like that. But again, it wouldn't actually have had much use because it's not hard to attack. So added cut is pretty pointless. Like all of the materia that aren't present kind of make sense that they're not present.
Yeah, makes sense.
Sorry,
they didn't put an attack up materia. They had one for all the other stats. Like there was an HP up, MP up, magic up, and no attack up.
Oh yeah, man, I'm forgetting all these things. Yeah, you're right.
But do you think they might integrate them into future parts? Because a lot of those things we wouldn't have gotten originally until further on in the gameplay.
Maybe.
Definitely really possible, cool. Yeah.
Possible. Kain, what was your most efficient materia setup?
Let's see. I had a lot for this. So yeah, like I was saying earlier, definitely I'd always have someone with heal and magnify for the healing. Give everyone revival, give everyone HP up materia. Cloud I'd always have Cloud with fire and elemental materia for the fire sword, and deadly dodge because he has pretty good AOE with it. Aerith, I'd give her first strike so she could just summon a familiar right away. Magic up, MP up, and if she's ever in the party, she was my main healer, so she'd get the magnify and healing. Let's see, Barrett gave him barrier, MP materia. Tifa had elemental and wind, also deadly dodge, ATB boost, and first strike materia, so she could just do all of her moves, chaining moves. And once hard mode started, I gave everyone prayer if they didn't have magnify and heal, because that was probably the thing I used the most once I was in hard mode. Yeah, that was basically the main thing I was using for most fights.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I was going to ask you, did you change your materia setup between normal and hard mode? So you've already answered that one.
Yeah.
Oh yes. So this is an interesting question that I came about from reading many things on the internet. The Rufus fight, the Rufus boss fight on Shinra headquarters was quite an interesting and different fight to a lot of the other boss battles in the game. A lot of people on the internet talked about it. Tomato and Kain, how did you approach this fight with the lovely dog Darkstar? Because it's quite a technical approach compared to the other ones.
Yeah, I used a lot of counter stance on that fight. That was the main thing I did on that.
Honestly, I used counter stance unless I was closing the distance between Cloud and an enemy. I use counter stance literally all the time throughout the game anyway. So I stuck to that tactic with Rufus. I actually came at it a bit more like a Dark Souls boss if that makes sense, wherein every time I died, I'd get a little bit, I'd learnt something and I'd get a bit further in the fight and I'd get a bit tighter with the dodging or the blocking, and I'd get to know his. I really thoroughly enjoyed that aspect of it, where I could see myself getting closer and closer to the end. I didn't ever feel like, oh, I'm going to throw my controller away.
You have to figure out what attacks you can block and what you have to dodge.
Yeah, there's actually, like, when you get into it, his moves are dodgeable, but only certain ones at certain timings, and I really enjoyed that, and I hope to see more fights like that. Definitely.
Yeah, it was quite different to every other fight, I think, and I was kind of wondering why it was just that one that they'd thought to do that with. And like you say, it would be good to have a good mix of that in any future parts. Hopefully they're looking all over the internet anyway and seeing that everyone's talking about it.
Yeah, seeing what everyone likes and doesn't like.
So yeah, I'm sure they are. Jay, compared to the other games that are being released this year, do you feel that this one is up to the same standards graphics wise?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like, man, I mean, I can talk about hours on this graphics itself. Like,
please do. Maybe not hours, but yeah.
This game incorporates Unreal Engine 4, which is very new to Square Enix. Like, they use their own. In FF15, they use their own engine called Luminous Engine. So they just got into Unreal Engine 4, and the power of Unreal Engine 4 is ridiculous. Like, you can see right now on. Well, I'm looking at your stream, and it's maybe it's lagged a little bit, but you can see the bloom effect. Like, the lights looks like the real lights. There's fancy motion blur. There's hair that hair looks like a real thing. There, I don't what else? Bokeh effect. You can see the like, I have bokeh effect. You can see like me and everything else is blurred behind. They did such a great job. And what's so amazing about Unreal Engine 4 is you never, I don't know if you guys ever thought about this, but whenever there's transition of this right now, what's playing right now is CGI, but you never notice when they're going CGI to real gameplay, they almost look like exact same thing.
Right.
Like right now, how they were just talking to is it Biggs or which? One of them. And you never notice you never notice, like, when you're just talking, the camera just zooms out right behind and Cloud, and you really don't notice the difference between like the gameplay and CGI, like versus in the original game and many other games. You guys remember the first train scene when there's CGI of Cloud, that blocky Cloud that looks amazing at the time, and there's transition. You can notice like everything just looks so much worse as it goes back to gameplay. You guys just remember that part, and I remember that clearly. And these guys did such a great job changing things around. Like right now, the CGI is playing, but you never notice when the transition happens. But their transition is there if you look at it really, really closely. I wish we see the train scene again, but that whenever in the remake, when the train comes in and there's a huge smoke, it was a very clever way for developers to transition that back into the gameplay, and you barely notice it. And it's amazing. And I can talk about hours, but one more thing about how amazing job they did is when you do when they're having a fight scene, so they have a motion blur and they have a per object blur. So whenever I move really fast, you see a motion blur versus and to have a motion blur, it looks more realistic. When you run really fast and you take a snapshot, you see a blur, and you have that. It's the same thing in the CGIs in this game, but during the gameplay, they turn the motion blur off so that whenever you move the camera, if you keep rotating the camera, you won't see the motion blur, because if you see a motion blur when you move camera, it's just it makes it too dizzy. You want to see everything for a game player. So they only turn off the per object blur, which I thought was so smart. And again, developers and the fact that they use Unreal Engine so smartly. I think that's what makes this game so much different than every other game, which they didn't even think about those stuff.
You clearly. Oh, sorry.
No, go on, Tomato.
I was going to say you clearly know a lot about the engine and everything.
Yeah.
Blues actually has a really good question. That are those cutscenes? Because you mentioned the cutscenes are pretty much seamless with the gameplay, which is every game has encountered that sudden switch to FMV from polygons or whatever. Are the cutscenes in missions and stuff just not in? Are they not done in Unreal at all or something, or are they the same engine being used there? Or are they genuine like movie files or whatever?
I don't know the details what if they use what program they used, but I know the whole game is made in Unreal Engine. They might I would expect their CGI to be not in Unreal Engine and do some, I don't know. I don't know what program, but like they probably
some professional CGI software.
Like,
yeah,
like Blender. Blender is. I don't know, but they use something that 3D program, and they made that into like MP3, MP4 file, and then they basically played that, and then when the MP4 file ended, they did amazing job transitioning back to the gameplay, and you barely notice. And they did a clever mechanics, as I mentioned, like the train scene having the whole smoke cover the whole place up, and then they transition back to the thing. And oftentimes they do very clever mechanics like that.
Kain next. So there were a few elongated areas compared to the original. For example, the sewers, the climb up from Wall Market, the sections between the Wall Market and other sectors. Did they stand out to you as a welcome addition? Did you find them, were they more to you seen as a grinding time or filler?
For the most part, they were fine. They didn't go on too long. The only ones that went way too long was when you're in the sewers the second time and you have to chase that little Abzul for the key.
Yeah.
That chase goes on forever. And then when you're in Chapter 9 and you're doing the whole Johnny side quest, and it's like 10 quests inside one quest.
Yeah.
Like, that was a bit much. Other than that, everything else wasn't too bad. It helped expand on things, and it didn't go on for too long to get annoying.
Yeah, and Tomato, do you feel like it's a bit of lazy game creation in some ways, where they were just kind of filling it in? So, for like example, in 8 we have a sewer section as well in the assassination part. Spoilers if anyone's never played Final Fantasy 8. There's an assassination part, and they have to walk around the sewers, and you can get lost quite easily, and it can get really annoying. That's more me. But
I did that once.
Tomato, do you feel like it's just a bit of a repeat of that, or did you feel like this was new creation for Remake?
Well, like using tile sets and things like that to generate maps it's definitely nothing new. It was like arguably done in the SNES era, where you'd have a set of tiles and you'd do it well. I wouldn't even call, even when it's done badly, necessarily lazy as well. It could just be like a bit of uninspired map design. Oddly, that you mentioned 8 is a quite interesting one, because that's the part of the reason I respect 7, 8, and 9 so much is they put a lot of effort at a time where polygons were a huge new thing. They put a lot of effort into making pre-rendered backgrounds that allowed them to use much higher quality graphics, it seemed, compared to other games. And it took a lot of effort to do those, is my understanding. And 8 is one of the only ones that uses a bunch of repeated assets in that. I wouldn't call it necessarily lazy. It did I agree that some of the elongated sewers felt, a bit filler, but especially that second time. But it's not necessarily lazy. It felt out of place more because you've just hit a point in the story where you're like, right, off to Shinra HQ. Who feels like exploring the sewers?
Exactly.
That's why it felt more cumbersome, I think, than necessarily the design. But in itself, like a sewer dungeon with a tile set's always, you know, it's always going to have tunnels and linearity to it, isn't it?
Okay, cool. And Jay, in regards to the motorbike sections, we've got it. I think they were repeated. The motorbike section was repeated something like 2 or 3 times throughout the game.
Yeah, you do it twice.
With the crazy, I can't remember the guy's name, but his physics
Roche.
on his
Roche.
the physics on his motorbike were crazy. Did you find that they were quite repetitive? Would you have suggested that they did any differences to those sections where they did the motorbike bit?
Well, I'm sorry, go on.
No, that was it, just bits, the motorbike bits.
I don't know what they, I don't know. Like, I think the devs were trying to listen to the fans, because if you're a fan of the original, that's something that the motorbike section is like what everyone got so excited, that the epic scene fight, like bike scene, and that minigame was so fun, and people were like, bring that back on. And I think devs kind of maybe overdid it. Maybe, I'm not sure. I was like, when I first played FF7 Remake, I was so excited the fact that they did the motorbike scene way earlier than when it was supposed to be, and I was like, whoa, this is so cool. And they tried to implement different kind of mechanics too. You know, you have to dodge a lot more. In my opinion, I liked it. I don't know where they're gonna take this. Like, are they gonna add more motorbike scene? Maybe. If they do so, maybe it would be pretty cool to have it more interactive. Like, maybe what if you have 2-3 different characters and you actually fight, you actually have to scroll different characters. I don't know. I don't know, because I'm indifferent. I like it, at the same time I don't like it.
I mean, what if they had it where you were on a motorbike to get around the world map before you get the buggy and things like that? You know, instead of just being a big polygon walking on a world, you have to get on a motorbike. That could be a thing.
Dude, I'm so excited for the world map and how it's gonna be like. But yeah, that would be interesting.
I think it'd be nice if your teammates actually helped you in those motorbike parts.
It's
pretty useless.
Yeah, I was actually, after the first motorbike section where you just play as Cloud, I was actually thinking, because the motorbike sections clearly drew a bit from the battle system. You know, like, you have your special with the triangle and the regular with the square. And I kind of then expected the second motorbike section to potentially, yeah, as you've mentioned, switch to your other characters like you do in the traditional battle, maybe out of Chaos and Materia. You know, they could easily expand on it, I think, and draw more, put more into it.
Cool. And Tomato, I mean, maybe you've answered this question. I was going to say, would you have preferred the remake to stay streamlined to the original, or are you welcoming to all of the changes that we've seen so far?
I'm pretty. I did roll my eyes at a lot of the changes when it came to, like, the whispers, say, but I'm more than happy. I always kind of knew going into this that I was going to play or I was going to buy or enjoy each part basically on its, or at least try to do it on its own individual merits. And if there's a story change, I can't just inherently say it's bad because it's different. I kind of have to look at whatever comes and go, yeah, okay. Like I say, I've said before, the whisper stuff I didn't really welcome, but the stuff where they really put care and intention to homaging the original but expanding upon it, the Hell House fight, the whole helping things in Slum Market, changing how Cloud gets all of his apparel, I really appreciated all of that stuff. So it entirely depends on the individual, like those individual changes, I guess. Yeah.
And Jay, I noticed during some of your playthrough, you were pointing out the map being quite sort of a linear view. Do you feel like they could have improved it? You mentioned in your videos of things like breaking glass if you were to kick a box or something. some kind of interaction with the environment around you? Do you feel they could have done more with those sections between, say, the Wall Market and Sector 7, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think so, but just being realistic, I think everything, it just comes down to budget and their timing, and I'm sure they had a huge time constraint. I mean, they pushed the due date of this original release to a month or whatever later. And even then, I'm sure like devs were like, I wish we could have done this. And their budget, I don't know what their budget is. I don't know if you guys noticed, but going back, also kind of relating this and going back to the graphics place, there are some questionable texture problems. If you guys notice, like if you like,
There's a little bit, yeah.
if you go around the world and just stand still in a lot of places, I mean, Walmart and there's a lot of places, stand still next to like a really low poly resolution brick wall that's and then you see very, very detailed cloud. It's kind of silly, and this happens a lot of places. The textures were kind of extremely low res, and then so you have to wonder like why. Like there's a scene, I don't know her name, but you guys remember the grandma who like
Yes.
stay?
Yeah.
There's a scene in which Cloud goes up and then Tifa was introducing where you stay, and then the door right behind the Cloud, the door was extremely low poly resolution, and it's just like a brown paint, and it like everyone saw that because they saw the animation, like the CGI.
Right.
You like got to wonder like why everyone's seeing, why did they not focus on this? And if you literally go downstairs and see a door right, like unnecessary door that's not interactable, it's such a high resolution, like you see all the details of the door. I don't know what they were thinking, like and also like I'm sure it has to do with time constraint and the budget, but it's some of the things are really questionable. Like why didn't they spend more time on making the environment more interactive, like breaking glass and just, I don't know, like it's, and obviously if you put these kind of efforts, you have to mess a lot with Unreal Engine as well, so it's a lot of time. But this part is kind of questionable for me from my perspective.
Yeah, like Pluz is asking in chat right now, was it a texture streaming / filtering issue, or did they literally put in incredible low res textures?
It's both, because well, most of the time it's just incredibly low resolution they just put in. So or maybe it's a bug from how they ported PS to PS4 game. I don't know, and there are a lot of people asking that. But one of them I know is a filtering issue, because as you run Cloud and you stop immediately, you can see polygons loading, and it gets a little bit better texture after like, I don't know, 2 seconds. So I know it's like some kind of like a filtering loading issue in certain aspect, but most of the times if you just literally stand still, if you look at the ground, it's just extremely low resolution. You're like, what am I looking at? So it's very questionable.
I was going to mention on that front, you mentioned the main characters. It definitely felt like the one I always think of in CGI is really telling is looking at characters' mouths. And I believe they use some kind of technology to voice map the movements to the specific regional dialogues. So there isn't the cliche someone talking in Japanese for the animation, but English words being completely out of sync sort of effect. But I found the NPCs' mouth movements were comparatively worse than the main characters and cast, which when they're stood side by side having a conversation in game was very like, you suddenly notice it.
What's wrong with your mouth?
Yeah. And then there's definitely loads of points in the game where you just don't notice it, because it's like, I'm just staring at a bunch of NPCs talking, or the main characters are all just talking. There are definitely some blips.
Yeah, and here's hoping that with the release of this, they're seeing where the mistakes have been made, and they'll know going on for the next part what they didn't do, what they forgot to do, because it's new to them using Unreal Engine. So moving on about that as well, if they're going to continue using Unreal for their future parts, do you think they will do an open world map? Do you think it's easy enough for them to make an open world map? Or is it possible they might close it off like other Final Fantasies in recent years? Or previous years?
Right.
That's to anyone. Sorry, that's to anyone.
Just understanding like the Unreal Engine and like how much time and the materials and the size it takes, like it's gonna be tough, and I don't know which way they're gonna take it. But to do open world with Unreal Engine and the fact that like the whole open world, that's immense amount of time, and I don't know if they have the time and the budget to do that. Like unless they come out with this game in I don't know 10 years, then maybe. But man, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, hoping it's not gonna take quite that long again.
Yeah, and I guess like it's totally maybe doable in the I'm expecting this upcoming game to be on PS5, which is gonna take a whole new level maybe. But like maybe they'll do something more of like a Final Fantasy 13 kind of scene. Lot of times FF13 was very linear, and they got this one map that was kind of giant but not really, and that still was kind of linear.
Yeah, when you
Maybe
get to
they'll limit it.
Pulse?
I don't know. Yeah. The Pulse thing.
Or they could do kind of like 12 and section off parts of the world.
Yeah.
Do you think they could, like I was going to say, like 14 do smaller regions of a bit open world, but then by the time we get to the airship, they revert to something like 10, where you're just presented a list of locations to go to.
That could make sense to do it that way.
They could totally. I just know that it's gonna take a lot of money and the time to make it more open world, and even right now the way they did it is pretty small area. It's not compared to open world where it's way more bigger.
Yeah. So like Goose is saying in chat, look at 15. They can still do it open. But that's what interested me most about it, is because with 15 they use their own engine, their own game engine.
Exactly. Yeah.
They chose Unreal.
In 15 they use a Luminous engine, and you can see the differences. Like they're way less texture. I guess maybe they did it better in certain thing. Like you could see a way more bigger of an improvement using Unreal Engine 4 versus the Luminous engine. And maybe they did it in 15. Maybe they'll do it like that, where the textures and everything is a little bit less. Although, like right now, the texture is a little bit wonky in FF Remake. But yeah, maybe they'll do something like that in 15.
This should be a nice little question. What was everybody's favorite area from a visual perspective? So, for example, there was looking up at the plate over Sector 7, or looking down when the plate's been destroyed. Did anyone have an area that they just looked around in awe at?
Can I say a cutscene for that?
Sure.
That cutscene where they give like the whole history of the world and Shinra. Mm-hmm. That's cutscene. I think that was the best looking cutscene in the game graphically.
With the reference to the ancients.
Right, yeah, when they're talking about the ancients and everything, and then goes to Midgard towards the end.
I'd say it's actually, that visually, that section was stunning. I actually liked the wall market at night specifically, when it was very active. I know, like we've mentioned, there's been like little areas where if you stared at it too long, you'd go, I see some stuff. But for just like running around in immersion and just enjoying the atmosphere of the place, that was my favorite. Yeah,
it's a really nice place too. You see a lot there.
Yeah, I would have to kind of agree with Tomato and say Wool Market as well. Like the atmosphere they brought and the energy and the vibe was very well done. Like even the small holes in small areas that you get to explore and what they say, it's really, really well done. At first, I was very overwhelmed by the size, but it got way better, I guess. And one more thing I wanted to say, this was my original sorry, a visual perspective that I wanted to say was the when I first went into Seventh Heaven Bar, I think that was really reminiscent of like how I play what I remembered a lot in FF7. So I was gonna pick that, but that comes very close to the wall market that I liked a lot.
Yeah, me personally, I was quite awestruck when we went to Eris's house. Goose is also saying that in chat. It's when it just that for me was like quite a big memory thing, with all of the flowers everywhere, and I always wondered how that they were going to turn that into this remake, and it was just so beautiful, and the views that you could get from moving the camera around and seeing all of the other sectors sort of in the background behind the house as well. I really liked Eris's house. It was pretty.
Yeah, they did a good job with it.
Yeah.
Kain, did anything stand out to you most as a big mistake made in this game? That could be anything story related, it could be battle related, anything that you saw as quite a mistake for this version of this game.
Yeah, I think the biggest mistake was their attempt at the classic mode, because I guess that was their attempt to get the older school players to enjoy it more, but the AI was just so slow and it just gets so boring that way. And for whatever reason, they locked it to only easy mode. Like you can't do harder modes on classic for some reason.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that because I think I might have started it on classic and then just didn't like it and I moved to easy. Just to make myself as easy.
He's just standing there. I tried it in the demo. I'm just standing there like waiting for Cloud to do something.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just gonna go on.
I'm sorry, but what about like, what do you guys think about like the moms who never played FF7 that might have been better suited for classic? So I could see that being okay with like a random mom who wanted to get into the game. Maybe, I don't know.
It could be. Yeah. They still might get bored with it after a while though.
True.
Once again, it's one of those things where it's like they're trying to please everybody. They've put enough things into this game that they're trying to get everybody as an audience.
Well, and I don't think I've played a single ARPG or game where that your companion's AI works just like 100%. Like, there's not a game out there that does that perfectly. Like, I don't think. Like, there's always some weird behavior and some. Why are you standing there doing nothing? Because you've decided it's time to guard when the enemy stopped attacking. Okay, fine.
At least in this game, they're pretty good at dodging and blocking for the most part.
And Tomato, this is something that you're regularly trying to do with your Final Fantasy gameplay. Do you think you can cheese it?
I'm.
Could you explain cheese it to people that don't know what cheesing it is?
Cheesing it is knowing the battle, the systems in place so well that, as I think, as Jay touched upon earlier, you can do it like pretty much perfectly when. You know, basically, there's no chance of losing in a lot of circumstances. Or in the case of a good example in the original 7, a cheese strat would be the gene attack in the Cosmo Canyon boss. I think that's the name. And it's an undead creature, so you can throw a phoenix down on it and it insta-dives. So there's no battle there. And that's what a cheese strat is, arguably. I think there's significantly less you can do with this game. I kind of like that to a degree. There's nothing. There's no point did I think, right, just do this, insta-win. I had to, even when I had my appropriate strategy, I still had to go, all right, okay, the enemy's done that. Now it's time to switch to this. And I had to still pay attention, you know. I think maybe normal. There might be some strats out there. I'm sure someone out there's speed run the game already, because there's insane gamers out there who do this sort of thing.
And people have done no damage runs already. Yeah,
exactly. Like, I don't think I'll necessarily do that to the extent like my specialty is you may have noticed like Final Fantasy 7 original 8 and 9 had they put a lot of effort in to make it so you could play the game entirely at level 1 without leveling, or do all your leveling at the start. And there's a lot less impetus on that in whatever strats, I think, for 7 Remake. Like,
okay, very nice,
sense?
very nice answer. Yes, Jay, do you think they'll continue your character progression into the next game? Do you think it'll read your gameplay files if you've played the previous one?
So this is the biggest question that everyone asks and everyone's wondering. And I did some research about like what they'll do maybe. And just looking at Square Enix's past history with Final Fantasy, I don't think they will continue with the gameplay files. So here's my thoughts. So they worked on Final Fantasy 13 with 2 sequels, and they did Final Fantasy 15 with DLC packs. And for both, they did not. Final Fantasy 13 save data from the previous titles, unlock bonuses in the follow-ups. Like you can use like the lightning returns. You have the save data from the first 2, and then if you use that file, you get the bonus unlocks. I think they give you skin or anything, everything, but you don't use the same. The progress wasn't carried through. Was one of the example. And 15, it was even easier for them to use the carry progress feature, but they didn't. There's no inventory carrying over or the progress. And I mean, I think, I don't know what their motive of doing that, but it has to be, maybe comes down to money. They want to keep the future games maybe accessible for players who have not played the prior games. And I mean, I don't know, like you can go both ways. Like you can have them purchase like the original game to play it, but then is that good enough for the again, I don't know, but I think just looking at the history of Square Enix and their Final Fantasy series, I do not think that the progress will be carried over, and they'll give you incentives like to play the original. They will give you maybe bonuses, but I don't think the items and the levels will be carried over.
Okay, cool. And following on from that, the max level for this game is 50. How do you think this will progress into the second game? So we already started this game with quite high hit points compared to usual Final Fantasy. Do you think they'll continue from level 50 or start all over again? That's to everybody, whoever wants to answer it.
I think they're as has been mentioned, it's been a couple of options really, but it's entirely dependent on that original, that previous question. If they decided to reset to level 1, they'll likely stick to caps of 50 or 100. If for whatever reason they did a BioWare import the save data, you will get a 5-level boost because you have previous save. There's nothing technically saying they need to max the levels at 100. Games have broken that limit before happily, but
this is the standard for Final Fantasy.
I'm inclined to think from a balancing perspective, and as Jay said, their previous history, they're more likely to go for a soft reset and lower your level, but maybe have higher HP for level 1. You know, go down that route.
Yeah, could do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I agree.
Me too.
Okay. And Kain, you have got 100% completion, correct?
Yep.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Firstly, how long did that take you? Do you know?
I think my total playtime was about 78 hours to do everything.
Very good.
Somewhere around there.
Which achievement was the most difficult for you to get, and which one did you enjoy the most? Do you know?
The hardest one is either just clearing hard mode, or there's this gauntlet you can go through in Hojo's lab after you beat the game. There's this hard mode gauntlet. Beating that gives you an achievement, and what that is, you basically fight all 4 summon battles back to back, and then you fight a secret boss. That's all back to back with no rest in between fights.
In hard mode as
No.
well. That's crazy.
Yeah, and in hard mode. Only hard
So
mode.
no MP restores or items.
Right. Well, it has the rules of the arena, so you'll get 50% health and MP between fights, but that's it. But actually, those were the most fun for me to get to because I was involved doing fun fights.
Okay, cool. Right, so we're now on to chat questions. The first one we've got through is from Goose, which says, which character would you be okay with not coming back in the next part of this remake game?
I don't think there's a single character in original 7 that I would be like, oh, I'm so glad they didn't put that in. In fact, every single NPC, I unfortunately know 7 original game well enough that I would notice them being missing. From the crazy guy who buys all the stuff in the shops in Medeal because they think the end of the world's come. You know, any of those characters I would notice not being there.
Well, what about things like, Vincent, for example? Would you be upset if they didn't bring Vincent back? Do we feel he's going to be a necessary character?
I think they'll bring him back as a necessary character.
Because we're already in the assumption that Yuffie's going to be a necessary that we have no choice with.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I'd be okay with her not coming back, though.
Probably, like, realistically, everyone's going to be brought back, because otherwise Square Enix is going to get,
Yeah.
Gonna get a talk.
Because all those main characters have become pretty popular, so...
And if you look at
someone
how...
will riot.
If you look at how much effort they put into, like, homaging every detail of original games, Midgar in the remake, like the Hell House fight, all of those little touches, I think they'll keep that trend with the NPCs and stuff going forward.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah. And with the whole Big Wedge and Jesse situation where they're sort of possibly alive but shouldn't be alive, would you be okay if they didn't bring one of those back? And if it was one of those, which one of those would you prefer to not bring back?
Which one is Biggs? Is that the...
Biggs is the one
I get
that's
mixed up with Biggs and Wedge.
confirmed that he was lying in the bed at the end.
Yeah, Biggs
Okay.
is the
He's the only
John
one
Cena,
really
like.
confirmed to be alive right now.
You guys really think Wedge died? Like,
I don't know. They left
He
it
was-
ambiguous. It sounded like he got flown off a window, but they didn't show anything.
Yeah, that's where it's kind of left.
I would want to see them be more conclusive with him and Jesse.
Yeah, Jesse should totally be dead.
I think, yeah,
yeah,
I think so too.
mean,
Because that scene was really impactful.
I don't know if people were mad about this stuff. I mean, I was indifferent. Like, it's like asking if Aerith to be alive and if people are okay with that. I mean, that's a big point, but like, I expected Big Switch and Jesse to be like not there, and I don't know. I mean, they're playing with my original memory, so I don't know if people are happy with that, okay with that. I mean, I think it's a good game in general.
I
I
honestly
would like an
thought,
explanation of how the hell Biggs got out of there alive.
Yeah,
I would be very pleased if they. I'm not saying like having multiple timelines or dimensions is necessarily good storytelling, but if in part 2 they went, yeah, they're actually all dead. That was just a scene to show you, like, look, there's some hope somewhere else in another dimension.
Someone else.
Don't cry. Yeah, you know, like if it was
Yeah.
just that, I'd be more happy because in particular the fact that they explicitly show Biggs as in the hospital bed at the end, his death scene I thought was one of the more. I found that more poignant than Jesse's when it happened.
Oh.
So that end scene was so much more like, oh, well,
Yeah,
now
that
what?
takes away the impact.
Yeah.
Agreed.
But in general, I think all the characters are gonna be there. Like, I don't like Kate Sith at all, but I think he's gonna be there, and I don't really care if he's not gonna be in here. But I think
I actually really want to
everyone's
see
gonna
what they're going to do with K-Chit
Yeah.
gameplay wise.
be here. Yeah,
I want to see what the megaphone weapons work out to be like.
Exactly. Like how is that going to work?
That was
Yeah.
always a bit of a confusion to me in the original game. Is he a giant robotic Moogle that runs up to enemies and yells at them through a megaphone
Yeah.
to cause damage? Okay.
I'd really be okay with seeing that.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'd go with that. Our final question from the audience is from Final Mog, and it is: any particular anticipations, be it hopes or fears, for the next part of the remake?
Dude, that's a big question.
It is. You see, on sort of off the back of the last question, I have a little bit of a fear that they will change Aeris's death, in that they might not.
Yeah, might. I mean, a lot of people are saying there may end up being
Oh,
some kind of choice involved with it too.
Yeah, an
it's
optional way
gonna
to
be
save her
interesting.
potentially.
I'm worried like how they're gonna match the scale from the end of the first game to all the other games now, all the other parts.
Like part of
How do
I
you
think
top
the biggest
fighting Destiny in part 1, basically?
yeah.
Yeah.
Unless they do the same thing again in part 2 and then at the end of part 3, which
Right.
would obviously be a bit samey. I'm actually looking because what I think the 7 remake did best was hitting like my heartstrings on little memories of original game. Like
True.
so, my biggest anticipations are just seeing like, oh, I really hope Sid still runs like a really weird waddle or whatever. I really want to see how he runs.
Yeah,
Or like,
yeah.
there's the Chocobo Sage, who's like an oft missed little part of original Game 7, who's this amnesiac, but a lot of his dialogue really made me giggle. I'm curious to see how all of my biggest, like, in all the things I'm looking forward to are just those little moments they did so well in Remake.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I'm really excited to see how they do Sid's gameplay in particular.
Yeah, I love Sid. Oh my god.
Yeah.
I guess I'm gonna agree with HPOM and say I'm kind of fearful and I'm kind of scared for Square Enix to do anything different than the original regarding Aerith. And man, she's pretty strong in this game. Like,
Yeah.
versus the original, I hated her so much. Just
Like-
looking at like a stat perspective and everything. I would be sad to lose her, but we'll see, man.
Yeah.
And,
And they added that aspect to her too. It's like she seems to know what's gonna happen to her.
Yeah. Oh yeah, dude. That surprised me when I saw in the beginning. You could see the future. I was like, whoa.
Yeah. It's like her and Sephiroth somehow know what's gonna happen already.
Yeah.
So I want to see. I'd like to see an explanation on that for sure.
Yeah, do we think that they're making it up as they go, or do you think they have actually mapped out every single part already?
They definitely mapped out, just knowing how the general gaming industry works. Just like they definitely mapped out, just even like the simplest maybe storyboard. They
Maybe not the
mapped
whole
out
details,
something.
but
They did such a great job with the story design because they made it not the same thing. It's not one of those like a Lion King thing when like they made the Lion King and the movie is the exact same thing and you get disappointed. And I was disappointed. The
I heard
exact
about
same
that.
thing. Versus like in here, it's different. It's definitely different that people wonder. It's not the same thing, but it's almost the same thing. So people are kind of intrigued and interested, and they want to buy the next series to figure out how it ends or how it goes.
Right.
You know?
Cool. Does everybody feel they've answered all that they would like to answer? Does anyone have any more points that they want to bring in?
Great game. I was I was ready to be disappointed, but man, it's such a great game.
Yeah,
But
I
that
really
one
enjoyed
was-
that game.
Yeah, like I wouldn't be surprised if this game got an award. The mechanics and the details, the graphics,
Yeah.
such a well done.
It's a tough
really hope
year
it
for them
does.
to be against the other games as well that are coming out for the award season. Do you think it's going to
You
struggle?
think?
I don't know.
I think it will potentially be a competitor for the whole. I don't really follow it, and I don't really care who wins Game
Right.
of the Year award. But I wouldn't be surprised if 7 was a contender for it. I know Cyberpunk will probably be a huge one.
That'll definitely be a huge name in there.
But I definitely wouldn't be surprised to see 7 in the running,
For sure.
or even win it.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you very much for being here, you guys. For everybody in chat, these three guys are all Twitch streamers, so feel free to give them a little follow, go check them out. Can I just run through you guys your schedules? So Jay, what's your usual schedule for Twitch?
Oh man, it's constantly changing. But Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and usually Monday I cook. I cook sometimes, and Wednesday I make some kind of drink. All days I play games, and Saturday I do some creative art streams.
And he is currently playing Final Fantasy VII Remake. If anybody wants to pop in playing that. Kain, what's your usual Twitch schedule? Usually
it's Monday through Thursday, Saturday. It'll be starting at either 10 or 10:30, depending on what I can get on. Starts at 10. Oh, this is EST time.
Yeah, mine's EST too.
10 or 10:30 EST, and then usually going around to about 1 or 1:30.
Whew, okay. And so, what about yourself?
I find it incredibly hard to stick to any kind of schedule, but I try and do a Saturday daytime in GMT, I guess, terms, and usually Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but in the evenings. But I am very, very liable not to do that or to do other days.
So just look for Tomato and he might be online.
I may be around.
Might pop up somewhere.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys, for being my guests on this podcast. And thank you everybody in chat.
Thanks for having us.
We will be back next month, yet to be determined as to what our content will be. Obviously, it's Final Fantasy based. If anybody has any suggestions, feel free to get in touch with me any way you want. I'm on all the socials. You can just whisper to me if you want.
All the things.
Yeah, just like if you've got any ideas or if you want to be involved in any future podcasts with us, just get in contact. I'm open for everybody to come and chat. So thanks again, everybody, and we'll have a good, wonderful night. Thank you for being here. Everybody say bye.
Bye. Thank you.